if we end it with, of course, John Lennon's death, which I remember like it was yesterday, 1980. The album I was playing on my turntable when the TV, I would turn the volume off in the TV when I was renting a house, and I was playing the album Double Fantasy. His
Okay, yeah.
name on the TV. I turned it up, and they said he had been shot and killed at the Dakota, and it was just
That's yeah.
life changing. And I said, Double Fantasy. I still have that album today. 1980. I don't know how old you were in 80. I wasn't too old either, actually. Long time ago.
I was 9 years from being alive.
Oh, all right. Okay. I was 23 at the time, but yeah, what a night. And if you went down the AM radio dial back then, AM FM, it was just nothing but Beatles music and talk shows talking about it. That's it.
Yeah.
Back then the radio was a lot different.
Yeah, no, I think that John's death was a huge event, just because of, like you said, he had released Double Fantasy. He was kind of out of his depression. He was out of his issues. He and Yoko had a great relationship. He was reconnecting with his kids.
Oh, I know.
And who knows what would have happened. And supposedly, I don't know if it's true. You might be able to confirm or refute this. But I heard that if John had lived, they would have reunited at Live Aid.
Oh my God, could you imagine that? Yeah.
I think that it's possible. I think that it would have been big enough stage.
I never thought of that. That's they've done it.
If John had lived, of course, the famous Robert Plant and Jimmy Page reunion happened then.
Yeah.
So to have a Beatle reunion then, I think would have been absolutely amazing if John had lived.
Yeah.
So obviously, John's death was very sad, and then later, when George passed away, that was also a very, very sad, sad time. And just, I believe, about a year after George's passing, they had the concert for George at the Royal Albert Hall
on DVD,
which is probably that is one of the two concerts or three concerts, I should say, that I really would have loved to have been at. Concert for George is one of them. George's concert for Bangladesh is another one I would have loved to have been at.
Yep.
And just a little off topic, but no, I think Ringo was there. The Last Waltz from the band. Definitely, those are my three concerts. People say Altamont or Woodstock or whatever. I want those three.
Was a masterpiece too. Yeah. And,
so
George,
it really is. It shows the influence and the sadness that took over when both John and George passed away, and then also the exuberance later on when Paul and Ringo would get together. You had Cirque du Soleil do Love in Vegas, which was
great in Vegas, all over the place. Yeah.
So, and you had Across the Universe, the movie, which I actually thought did a pretty good job of paying tribute. And just the later events that happened with both Paul and Ringo being part of it, I think in the last 15, 20 years have done a really good job to pay tribute to their legacy.
Yeah, their legacy to Dave after 60 years. I mean, just incredible. And they're still, in 2000, they came out with the number one. It knocked the Backstreet Boys out of number one. And it sold like number one in 32 countries, the anthology. They did well. They just they're going to be around, I think, forever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, and that's also another thing that people don't realize. Okay. From 1962 to 1970, the Beatles did more and accomplished more than most other bands and artists have done in 50 or 60 years.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. In a short period of time. Yeah.
And they only toured until 1966.
I know.
So, imagine today if Taylor Swift stopped touring, or if into the, like Jay-Z stopped touring.
Yep.
or a country music superstar, like stop touring, there'd be pandemonium, because there's such a clamoring for the live
Absolutely.
music, and
Yeah.
that's how they sell their albums. The
Yep.
Beatles did not have to tour to
No,
sell.
they didn't need much promotion at all to sell. Anything they came out with is going number one.
Yeah.
Bands they depended on touring. They had to tour. That's very unique. They didn't. After 66, that was it. Dave, Brian Epstein, you could classify him as the fifth Beatle too, as they say.
Sure. Sure. I mean, there are definitely a lot of people you could say as the fifth Beatle, throughout the years, but I think Brian was, especially early on, the most important. He was their manager. He had, he got their deal with with EMI, and just really, was it EMI, BMI, EMI, I think, right?
EMI, I think it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
So you have a guy who was kind of like a wrangler. People say that nowadays, like, they have handlers. Artists and celebrities, they have their handlers. Brian Epstein really was I would call him like the potion master.
Yeah.
He took all the ingredients that the Beatles had, and he formed them, he mixed them, and he put in the right ingredients to give you the final form of the Beatles.
Right.
No longer were they in Hamburg, Germany, or down in the clubs in Liverpool, and in the leather jackets and the greasy hair. They were in almost like schoolboy outfits, and very like preppy outfits. Their hair was longer, comparatively to a lot of men's hair at the time, but they were clean.
Right.
So you have this very good boy next door image, and these great songs. And it was really Brian Epstein who painted the picture of the
Yeah, he
Beatles.
did.
I really think that it was Brian Epstein who created Beatlemania.
Yeah, I think so, because of they had the Beatle boots, the way they dressed, the hair, the whole look was Brian Epstein, and they needed Brian because Brian had an in, But yeah, he was responsible for that, and I know Stuart Sutcliffe too, Dave.
Yeah,
Very close to John Lennon, I know, and Stuart died very early, like way before Beatlemania took off here in the States.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to recognize Stewart as part of it, and the early shaping of the Quarrymen, as they were called
Quarrymen, yeah.
early on. And I think that as close as Stewart and John were, I think that without Stuart Sutcliffe, maybe the combination eventually wouldn't have been there.
I know. Yeah. How fate would have it. And Stuart and John very close. I think he died of a brain hemorrhage, I believe.
Yeah, it was either a hemorrhage or an aneurysm, I think, and it was in Germany. I believe it was in Germany.
His girlfriend took a lot of pictures of the Beatles back there when they were in Hamburg.
Yeah.
She even said she knew there was just something different about those guys. She kind of thought they would make him. What was her name? Ingrid, or she was photographer, in Stuart.
Right, yeah.
Art college, and was an artist too, which John Lennon was obviously too.
Mm-hmm.
And one guy you got to mention, Billy Preston.
Man. Oh yeah.
Wow, man, what a keyboard player.
Definitely another fifth Beatle. Billy Preston, you can hear his keyboard on so many tracks.
Oh my God.
And I think that he is really, something about Billy Preston really, brought in a different sound.
George got him to come to England.
And I mean, George was really influential with his, with the other, the fifth Beatles as well. Because I mean, if you think about it, I think that Eric Clapton could be a fifth Beatle.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. George said he actually wanted Billy Preston to, if they hadn't split up, to join the Beatles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because his keyboard playing and Get Back and Don't Let Me Down. all the way through that the Let It Be album. And
Sure.
who else they call the fifth Beatle? George Martin, of course.
Yep.
Very,
Um,
he was a
yep.
big
Uh,
influence on that.
Clapton too.
Yes.
All the
Yep.
the great guitar parts.
Yep. While
And
my
I thought,
guitar gently weeps, Clapton's
oh
playing
yeah.
the lead on that.
So you had a lot of really great artists
Yeah,
that helped mold the sound
right.
of the Beatles. And just really, I think that they realized that there was something special going on, and there was something
Oh,
really
yeah.
memorable
Yep.
going on. So when John, Paul, George, and Ringo are like, "Hey, you want to be part of this?" or "Hey, I like your sound. Maybe you should bring it in."
Right.
You said yes.
They didn't, yeah, they didn't have too many people that were allowed in the studio when they recorded or anybody on a record with them.
Right.
Almost unheard of, other than Clapton and Billy Preston, and that's about it, you know. They didn't they were very strict in the studio, all business.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And George Harrison, Dave, of course, Monty Python. You know a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
George was a big fan
Yep.
of Monty Python. He really liked movies. And so I think he got a little bit of taste of that with Hard Day's Night and Help in the mid 60s. Fast forward a decade later, George had heard that Monty Python, I guess, was having trouble, or they actually came to him. They were writing Life of Brian,
Right.
which is their biblical spoof.
Yep.
And they were on like a beach somewhere writing, and they realized like we didn't have any money. I think they needed like $3 million or something for it.
Like that. Yeah.
And
1974, I think it was.
it was it was I think it was mid to late 70s for that for when it was released.
Right.
So they're writing and they're realizing we can't get this movie made. So they go to George. I think George had a relationship with Eric Idle. I believe they knew each other, and why did George Harrison give Monty Python the $3+ million to make Life of Brian? Because he wanted to see the movie.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah,
That's what it was. And I think Monty Python Monty Python ended up saying that it was the most expensive movie ticket ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you ever watch Time Bandits, George? Time Bandits, good little movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Time Bandits.
So George had his foray into movies.
Yeah.
Ringo had his foray into movies too. Caveman, that awful masterpiece.
Had 6 words in the whole movie, I think it was something like that.
So I think it's also interesting to see that the Beatles, even post Beatle career, they influenced a lot of different media, with movies, besides music, TV and everything. So there was a clamoring for knowing that, oh well, these guys are still around, they're still creating things, so let's see if they could help us.
And then of course the Beatles record company, Apple. Ooh. That was Apple. That was oh my goodness, they wanted to really start their own label, Apple Records, and have it work. And they when it first started, they hired on the band Badfinger, that had a lot of hits. James Taylor was signed.
Yep, I believe James Taylor was actually the first
solo
artist signed to Apple.
Yeah, he was. And Mary Hopkins, those were the days hit. And they wanted to, like, struggling artists, come on in, we'll record you, maybe we can do something. They tried to be nice, but the music business, the way it is, and the management and the money problems with the big one. They were they were bleeding, losing so much money.
Yeah. They were able to do something that not a lot of people did in the beginning. They were able to give themselves the freedom to be the decision makers, to write, to produce, to make everything their own. But of course, like you said, the business side and the financial side, it's tough. Now, I have a bit of a theory that if Brian Epstein had lived, I think Apple would have been in a lot better shape.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. I think so. Yeah. Yeah, they didn't have that guidance that they had with Brian. They were
Right.
on their own. And man, it showed. They had Alan Klein, but he was doing some sketchy stuff to, behind the scenes. They weren't taking care of business.
Right.
They were about the songs and writing. But you're right. If Brian would have been around, yeah, Brian was, as far as I know, he was totally honest and was a great manager. Brian got, I think, 25% of what they earned in the 60s.
Pretty good.
That's very good. Yeah, that's very good. Well, I could say he's a lot better than Colonel Tom Parker would be.
Oh yeah.
Colonel Tom. But anyway, yeah, the Apple later. James Taylor did say when he was recording with him, he got to sit in some of the White Album sessions.
Mm-hmm.
He said he couldn't believe it. He said, "I'm actually sitting here, and these guys are recording." He said, "He couldn't believe it. It's unheard of." In 1966, of course, John Lennon making God, I can't paraphrase. It's something to the effect that the Beatles meant more to kids than Jesus Christ or Christianity. And John did have that press conference, and he said, "I've got to do something because it's like it was huge news at the time." And John said, "No, I'm not saying we're better, greater, comparing us to God." He said, "I wasn't saying that." He said, "I just for this particular time, more kids, they're buying the albums. We're huge." But he wasn't saying we're bigger or greater than Jesus Christ. I think that's kind of been misinterpreted or maybe taken the wrong way. People take that the wrong way, and they still kind of. I think, especially down in the South, they had all the record burnings down there, like piles, radio stations banning their music and stuff. And John did apologize for it.
I'm not saying that we're better or greater or comparing us with Jesus Christ as a person or God as a thing or whatever it is. I just said what I said and it was wrong or was taken wrong, and now it's all this.
Did you mean that the Beatles are more popular than Christ? When I was talking about it, it was very close and intimate with this person that I know who happens to be a reporter. I was using expressions on things that I just read and derived about Christianity, only I was saying it in the simplest form that I know, which is the natural way I talk.
What's the most enjoyable thing to you about this adulation, this almost godhood on earth that you've achieved?
Don't say that. It was him.
He said I got to do something. So they had the press conference in Memphis, Tennessee before the show, and you could tell there, man, things were just not going good, Dave.
Oh yeah, and also you have the fact that they were already trying to figure out touring and whether they could do it or whether they had to stop. It was not just the technical issues they were having, but with the comment that was I think taken out of context or at least misconstrued a little bit.
Right.
It's just it's the safety. When they had the Klan actually stated that the Beatles were like targets, and
they were. Oh yeah.
And I only saw newsreels and stuff, and I've seen stories about it, but as someone who saw the Beatles firsthand, what was your reaction to it? How did you feel?
At the age I was at the time, I didn't really know what to feel. I said I'd have to read it again. I read it like he wasn't saying we're better or greater or anything like that. A comparison. He just said they were more popular. Period. I mean, you can say you're more popular than anything, and if you're more popular, that doesn't mean you're saying we're better. That's how I look at it. I've always looked at it that way. Of course, I'm a huge Beatle fan. I'm going to defend it.
Right.
But yeah, the Ku Klux Klan were at before the concerts threatened to, set off bombs and stuff at Beatles concerts. I've got footage of that you can find that stuff on YouTube and
I also think it's interesting to show too, like, back then, like the power of radio, because it was the radio, it was the radio DJs that were calling for the ban and the boycott, and organizing the burnings, and people were coming on and talking, and they got crowds, they got thousands of people to come out and throw Beatles records into fires and smash them.
Yep.
And it was a real interesting time, because you had such a positive reception to it, that and of course there's always going to be the detractors, there's always going to be that generational divide, that like this music is bad, our music was better, or this music is a bad influence, you should listen to real music, or whatever. But I think that that Lennon's statement was just a way for a certain group of people to be able to say, you know what, we were right, the Beatles are bad. We're gonna show you. We're gonna toss the records into the fire. We're gonna break them. Come out and be anti-Beatle because of what he said. And I think that it's interesting, the the stir that it actually caused, and like the pandemonium that that you saw. There was a lot of passion behind it.
Oh yeah, the record burnings, and I mean thousands of records. They were just piled up. It's not good for the environment. You think about it.
Yeah,
You can tell. But yeah, it was. I think the radio station, actually, that was one of the top stations. I think it got hit by lightning or something, or knocked off the air. So even God wasn't happy, I guess. I don't know. Maybe, but no, I don't. I just think. I don't think John meant it that way. I just think it was misconstrued, and that's it. That's the way, because that was a big thing. And they were involved, oh God, when the Philippines, when they toured, another controversy, the Marcos from the Philippines, they had a day off, and they said, it's our day off. We only got one day off. And they were mad. The Marcos came out, and the Beatles were lucky to get out of that country.
Yeah.
It was really bad. They said they couldn't believe they survived. People turned on them just like that. The crowds were, they wanting to shoot them, and because they snubbed the royal family, or wherever they're, the Marcos. Yeah. So, and that happened, and George said, never go back to the Philippines again. After that, he said, oh my God, that was scary, he said. So, but that was a controversy. I mean, it's their day off. They didn't get much time. And they woke up in the hotel, and first family, or, the family, or Marcos, snubbed by the Beatles. Headlines, so. Yeah, so that was a controversy. And Philippines, the Beatles are huge. I think they're still huge over there in that country. Most countries these days. So yeah. Final thoughts on the Beatles for me is it's their image. Yeah, their image. Four guys. Their music, definitely. It's, to me, most important part is just the great amount of music, and as people, I respect them for what they went through. They were working class in Liverpool, and they said they really were working class at the end too. They just come from that. But their music is just, they were geniuses, and their influence after 60 years. I fell in love with them back, when I was like 7 years old, and it's been that way. My favorite band since then, and always will be, So, Dave, what do you think?
I definitely agree. They are my favorite band, and I know, I guess it's easy to say that, but I mean, I really love the Beatles. I do. I would put them, in a category of their own. They have influenced so many, beyond. But also, I would put them in historically in categories, with some of the classics, like they're going to be known for hundreds, if not thousands of years later. Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, but also other artists like Scott Joplin, with Ragtime, huge influence.
Yeah.
Like the classic, rhythm and blues people, like Little Richard,
Oh yeah. Oh,
Bo
man.
Diddley.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're as big, if not bigger than Elvis was. They're so important. Their music, what they produced, whatever you think about the individual people, some people don't have the best opinion of the individual people.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
But
right.
their collective art will stand the test of time, and I think that the fact that they're talked about so much 60 years later, is just proof that what they did as a group was that important.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, I got to say, thank you so much for joining me on the program. I did not want to do this alone. I said, this isn't going to work. And then Elijah said that Dave is a big Beatles fan. I say, Dave, then. So I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate you coming on tonight doing this.
Oh, I had a lot of fun. I love talking about like the Beatles. I always will. It was a great time, talking, and I think that it's definitely great to find something that you're really passionate about and go over it with other people, that are just as passionate about it.
Yeah.
So the Beatles is definitely a topic that I will always want to talk about.
All right, Dave. Well, again, thank you. And now we get to the part. Yes, the underrated slice. I'm going to go to a song. I've always loved it. And a lot of people don't know what it is. Martha, My Dear. Off the White Album. Martha. That was about Paul McCartney's dog. Big sheepdog he had. It was called Martha. And my favorite slice, if I had to say, Donnie, will put you here on an island all by yourself. You only got one Beatles song. I said, no, can I have two? No, just one. Since I'd probably be depressed, maybe it's, I don't know, Octopus's Garden. I was going to say Day in the Life. Love that tune.
Mm-hmm.
That absolute masterpiece of Sgt. Pepper. So that is it, folks. A wrap again. Thank you to Dave Cohen for being my guest on the program today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe in those great t-shirts. Licorice Pizza t-shirts, different colors, all different sizes. So again, until the next time, peace out.